So there's a lot here because the reason I'm on this podcast is because of the conflict in the Middle East, and that is, I don't know how to say this without sounding arrogant. I get a lot of requests to be on podcasts. Your podcast is new, and it's not of the size or the stature of a podcast I usually agree to do, to be blunt. But I have been really moved, and I think the courage and the candor you're showing around Israel is really. I just respect you, and I respect the risks you're taking, and I respect how it's spoken and courageous you're being on the issue. And for me, it sounds like Judaism plays a bigger role in your life than it does for me. I am not a religious person. I'm an atheist, and I've never felt much of a connection to Israel, and I feel like this is finally time for me to actually shift my part-time Jewish status to full-time, because I feel like I've done almost nothing for Israel and Judaism, and I'm just very moved by the leadership you're showing around the issue. Because
Rabbi, we got him. We got Scott. Don't worry, we got him.
Well, the reality is, and I've gotten some of this, but I'm already financially secure. There's a risk to saying these things in an environment where the majority of young people and many people on the left are conflating the struggles of the Gazans, which are real, the struggle of the Palestinians, which is real, with the civil rights movement. And I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions that are uninformed and uneducated about what is actually going on there. You use words like apartheid, and yet they don't want to look at the fact that every Arab nation used to have tens or hundreds of thousands of Jews and now has none. They want to talk about genocide, and they don't understand the word. If Israel wanted to commit genocide against the people of Palestine, they could do it very easily. And yet it's a stated mission, as the only amendment, the only constitution of Hamas is the extermination of the Jewish people. And I feel as if the lack of education, the lack of history among our youth on campus, and then the willingness or the reservoir or the iceberg below the surface of anti-Semitism in the United States has been profoundly rattling for me, whether it's the way this conflict is presented in the media, whether it's, when they fire rockets at Israel, it's war. When we fire rockets, it's a war crime. The even use of the word war crime, where the IDF has war crimes. If you're an Israeli soldier and you slaughter someone in front of their parents, you are going to jail. That is considered just standard practice across Hamas. And it's incredibly upsetting and disturbing to me to see what I feel are well-intentioned but totally misinformed people on the far left, and I consider myself a progressive, and people on campus my notion is I want to say you should invite someone from us to one of your rallies and start off with a discussion around your preferred pronouns. Like, what exactly do you think Hamas? If Israel, I like the litmus test that Sam Harris applies, and he's kind of a role model of mine, and that is, look at what would happen if both parties were in charge. If Israel were in charge of the U.S. government and our military, the next day you wouldn't know any different. Civil rights, jury trials, scientific research, no child labor, courts, women's rights. If Hamas got control of our Congress and our military, they would start killing people by the millions, Christians, gay people. And it just strikes me as just so incredibly, the definition of stupid is you do things that are harmful to others and harmful to yourself. And I think that people who are supporting Hamas on the far left, especially, I understand Palestinians and the empathy they feel for their family and what I believe has been a series of terrible decisions by the current administration in Israel. I think Netanyahu has been terrible for Israel and Jews. I understand their pain and their empathy, but the folks here on the far left on campuses and in Congress who, to me, they're just being stupid. They don't realize that these people, if they had the chance, would likely unceremoniously exterminate them. There's no empathy for gay people or trans people or Christians across Hamas. So I find it incredibly disappointing. Now, back to your issue around purpose. Young men and young people in America, but specifically young men, are really in sort of a mental health crisis that has exploded for a variety of reasons, concierge parenting, single-parent households, social media. But in Israel, there's actually some of the lowest levels of teen depression and depression among young adults. Interesting. And then the question is, well, what are they doing such that young people seem to be less prone to these terrible episodes of suicidal ideation or feeling useless or worthless? And I think a big part of it is national service and that they feel a connection to their country. And I would like to see national service in America. I think America is a wonderful nation, and I think young people don't realize how fortunate they are. But I think the 3-year service for men and women, and it doesn't have to be military, as you know, it can be in social services or in the healthcare industry. I think it gives young people a sense of connection to each other, gives them an opportunity to meet mentors, mates, business partners from different backgrounds. I mean, we were talking about apartheid. There's 1.2 million or 2.1 million Arabs in Israel, members of the Knesset, own businesses, on the Supreme Court. And there's a connective tissue in Israel that gives people a sense of purpose that I think is not only lacking in most nations, but really lacking in the United States. And the result is younger people have a greater sense of purpose there. And I think there's a lot we can learn from Israel. And the place I start, and something I've been thinking about and fighting for, and it's easy to say now that I've aged out of that demographic, is I think America would really benefit from national service. I think it's a wonderful country, and I think young people don't appreciate how much sacrifice has been demonstrated and levied by other people for their benefit.
And do you mean like culturally encouraged or mandated by as a draft the way Israel does it? Because it would be harder. It's apples and oranges because Israel is smaller, like you said, and has a little bit more of a mission-driven culture in terms of protecting itself in a neighborhood that's very hostile. I just wonder what kind of pushback. But I understand that the effects of having one have this positive effect on young people by giving them a sense of orientation, a sense of community with their country, and feeling a sense of belonging. And
I'd like to see it. I mean, theoretically, magic wand, mandatory. I don't think you can do that at this point. The fact that we don't have mandatory military service, how are you going to have mandatory national service? And I just don't. I don't think a younger generation is going to let boomers like myself, or I'm actually Gen X, decide they should go spend 3 years helping the nation. Yeah. But I think a massive investment that makes it really enticing, intoxicating, pay for your college, whatever it might be, just huge opportunities, a rite of passage. I'd like to see mandatory. I don't know if that's pragmatic.
But in terms of aside from on the national level, I don't know. Something seems to be really wrong on the local level for these students who I don't know if it's, especially on college campuses we were talking about before.
Especially Ivy League campuses.
Yeah, like, it's one thing for somebody dwelling in their basement that has no personal connections to anything and has no aspirations, and therefore they become bitter and resentful and dangerous. But we're seeing this in the ivory towers and the Ivy League schools. There's something going on with the ideas here that are flipping people's sense of, forget sophisticated morality, basic human decency. And that has been so inexplicable to me because there are some people, like you said, it's revealed a certain ideological anti-Semitism that they're holding Israel to this impossible standard, and they rejected this idea or are uncomfortable with this idea of the Jewish people having a state or having self-determination. There's a willful distortion of history. And then obviously in these streets and protests, this completely ill-informed mass of young people who I think are searching for some kind of meaning. They can't find the Jordan River on a map, but they're shouting from the river to the sea. And there's just a part of me that it's it's inexplicable, other than, I don't know, there's something wrong psychologically. I can't diagnose them en masse, but do you have anything else as far as like what comes to mind in thinking what's going on with these young people? And is it willful?
I think it's a few things. One is just a natural, healthy reaction from young people to zig when their parents are zagging. Whether it's listening to rock and roll or being against the Vietnam War, there has always been a generational divide, and it's healthy. Young people want to push the boundaries. They want to rebel, and that's important.